Some women are born into cages. Others have them built around them, piece by piece, until the day they realize there's no door left to open. Cordelia Thornwell's cage had been under construction for 22 years. But she didn't truly see the bars until the morning her father told her she would marry Lord Mortimer Blackwell, a man whose first two wives had died under mysterious circumstances. She had 18 hours to escape. 18 hours to gather her courage, her mother's jewels, and what little hope she had left. 18 hours before she became the third Mrs. Blackwell. The third to walk into that house. The third who would likely never walk out. But Cordelia had a plan. She had a man who swore he loved her waiting at an inn in Bath. She had everything she owned sewn into the lining of her cloak. She had hope, fragile, desperate hope that love would be enough to save her. She was wrong. What she discovered that night in the White Hart Inn would shatter every belief she'd ever held about love, trust, and the men who promised salvation while planning destruction. And what she did in response, stumbling through dark streets with tears on her face, colliding with a stranger whose winter-gray eyes seemed to see straight through her soul, making an offer so desperate and impossible it should have been refused, would change not just her life, but the fate of everyone who'd ever tried to hurt her. If you've ever felt trapped, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever wondered whether courage is enough, stay with Cordelia. Because what happens next will break your heart, put it back together, and remind you why some fairy tales require more bravery than magic. This is the story of a girl who needed a husband by morning, and the Duke who gave her a kingdom instead. Bath, England, October 1851. Cordelia Thornwell had exactly 18 hours to find a husband, or she would become the third wife of a man whose first two had died under mysterious circumstances. She had a plan. She had her mother's jewels sewn into her cloak. And she had a man who swore he loved her waiting at the White Hart Inn. What she didn't have was the truth. Bath, Somerset, October 1851. Thornwell Estate, 6 p.m. The sapphire necklace was the last piece. Cordelia's fingers trembled as she threaded it into the hidden pocket Nell had sewn into the lining of her traveling cloak 3 days ago. Beside it rested her mother's diamond earbobs, the pearl bracelet from her grandmother, and the ruby ring that had been in the Thornwell family for 6 generations. Everything of value she possessed, now concealed against her body like a secret heartbeat. "My lady," Nell whispered from the doorway, her round face pale in the candlelight. "The guards change shifts in 15 minutes. If we're going to do this, we're doing it." Cordelia's voice came out steadier than she felt. She fastened the cloak at her throat, pulled the hood low over her distinctive auburn hair, and turned to face her maid. "You're certain Felix received my message?" "I delivered it myself this morning, just as you asked," he said. Nell's expression softened with something that might have been pity or hope. Cordelia couldn't tell which. "He said he'd be waiting at the White Hart, that he'd arranged everything, that you'd be safe." Safe. The word felt foreign on Cordelia's tongue. She hadn't felt safe since the morning 3 weeks ago when her father had summoned her to his study and informed her, with all the emotional warmth of a man discussing livestock, that she would marry Lord Mortimer Blackwell in 18 days. "He's a respected peer," Godfrey Thornwell had said, not even looking up from his correspondence. "Wealthy beyond measure. The connection will restore our family's standing. He's 65 years old," Cordelia had whispered, horror stealing her voice. "And his last 2 wives died of natural causes. Tragedy, certainly, but hardly uncommon." Her father's eyes had finally lifted to meet hers, cold as January frost. "You will marry Lord Blackwell in 18 days, Cordelia. This discussion is over." She'd stood there in his study, the Persian rug soft beneath her feet, and felt the walls of her life closing in like a coffin. That night at dinner, Mortimer had attended. She'd watched his liver-spotted hands cut into roasted pheasant, watched him lick grease from his fingers, and imagined those same hands touching her, owning her, when he'd leaned close to whisper, You'll be a beautiful bride, my dear. His breath had smelled of decay and expensive wine. She'd excused herself and vomited in the nearest water closet. But then there was Felix. Felix with his warm brown eyes and calloused hands that were gentle when they touched her face. Felix, who worked in her father's stables and had no title, no fortune, no social standing, but who looked at her like she was something precious instead of something to be traded. Their first kiss had been in the rose garden 6 months ago, hidden behind the arbor where no one ever walked. He'd tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said, "You deserve better than this life, Cordelia. Better than what your father has planned." "What I deserve doesn't matter," she'd whispered. "I'm a baron's daughter. My fate was decided the day I was born." "Then change your fate." His words had been so simple, so impossibly brave. "Run away with me." She thought he was mad. But over the following months, as her father's plans for her marriage crystallized into horrifying reality, Felix's madness had started to sound like salvation. "I'll find work in London," he'd promised during their last stolen meeting in the stables. "We'll marry quietly at a registry office. Your father can't force you once you're wed. We'll start over, just us. I'll keep you safe, Cordelia. I swear it. I love you," she'd breathed against his mouth, tasting hope for the first time in years. "I love you more than anything," he'd sworn back. Now, standing in her chambers with Nell's worried eyes on her face, Cordelia touched the hidden jewels beneath her cloak one final time. This was enough to start a new life. Enough to rent modest lodgings in London until Felix found work. Enough to buy their freedom. "Let's go," she said, "before I lose my courage." They moved through Thornwell Estate like ghosts down the servants' stairs Cordelia had discovered as a child, through the narrow passage behind the kitchen that no one used anymore, out into the October night where the moon hung fat and luminous above the Somerset hills. Cordelia didn't look back at the only home she'd ever known. The walk to Bath took 40 minutes through fields and shadowed lanes. By the time the lights of the city appeared ahead, Cordelia's practical boots were muddied and her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. If you're already feeling her desperation, stay with her, because what happens next will break her completely. The White Hart Inn stood on a corner near the old Roman baths, its windows glowing warm and yellow in the darkness. Inside, Cordelia could hear laughter, the clink of glasses, the low rumble of conversation. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that outside in the shadows, a baron's daughter was about to throw away everything for love. "I'll wait here," Nell said, pressing Cordelia's hand. "If anything goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong." Cordelia tried to smile. "Felix loves me. He'll keep me safe." She pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the warmth of the inn. The common room was crowded with travelers and locals alike. Pipe smoke hung in the air. A fire crackled in the massive stone hearth. Cordelia kept her hood up, scanning faces, searching for the one that mattered. And then she saw him. Felix sat in a dark corner near the back, his familiar figure leaning over a table with 2 other men. The smile on his face was wide, animated in a way Cordelia rarely saw. Relief flooded through her, so powerfully her knees weakened. He came. He really came. But the relief curdled almost immediately into confusion. He'd brought other people. Why? They were supposed to flee immediately, under cover of darkness. There was no time for social conversation. Every minute spent here was another minute for the guards to discover her absence. Cordelia began to move toward him, but something instinct, intuition, the whisper of a warning she couldn't name made her hesitate. Instead, she slipped between tables, keeping to the shadows near the wall, approaching from a different angle where she could hear them without being seen. Just to understand what's happening, she told herself. Just to be sure. The voices reached her in fragments at first, lost amid the general noise of the tavern. Then she moved closer, pressing herself behind a thick wooden pillar that supported the ceiling beams. And Felix's words struck her like physical blows. She should be on her way now, he was saying, checking the moon's position through the window. probably crawling through the castle tunnels at this very moment, thinking she's being so clever. One of the men laughed a harsh, ugly sound that made Cordelia's stomach twist. And she really believes you're going to run away with her? You? A common gamekeeper with a baron's daughter? Completely convinced. Felix leaned back in his chair, his grin wide and cruel in a way Cordelia had never seen before. You should have seen the way she looked at me during our secret meetings. Like I was some kind of romantic hero from her stupid books. Felix, save me. Felix, take me away. Felix, I love you. He mimicked her voice high and whiny and desperate, and the men burst into laughter that seemed to echo straight through Cordelia's bones. The world tilted. No, this cannot be happening. So the plan stays the same? The older man asked, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. We help you escape with her, take you out of the village as agreed? Exactly. Felix took a satisfied swig of ale. You'll escort us along the northern roads like hired guards protecting us. It'll look legitimate. The fool will feel safe, even protected. And when we reach Thornwood Forest? The younger man asked, leaning forward with morbid interest. Felix's smile widened, predatory and vicious. Then we do exactly what we planned. I take all her gold, all the jewels that spoiled noble brat has been hoarding for years, and the three of us split the fortune. Then we leave her there alone and with nothing far enough from home that she can't easily return. A fortune split 3 ways, the older man murmured, his eyes gleaming with greed. Far more than that, my friend. Felix raised his tankard in a mocking toast. We're talking about enough wealth to buy land, start businesses, live like lords ourselves in any village we choose. And all we have to do is pretend to help a lovesick fool for a few hours. If this is breaking your heart, don't abandon Cordelia. Now she needs you to witness what comes next. The words kept coming, each one a fresh knife wound. What if she causes trouble afterward? The younger man asked. If she tells someone? Felix shrugged with cruel indifference. Who will believe her? A desperate noble woman who ran away from home to meet a lover and was abandoned in the forest? They'll think she lost her mind from shame. And even if someone does believe her, the 3 of us will be long gone with enough money to disappear into different counties if necessary. He checked the moon's position again, gauging the time. She should arrive any moment now. I can't wait to see that lovesick look in those foolish eyes when I appear all concerned about our great romantic escape. It'll be almost too entertaining. The 3 men laughed, low and conspiratorial, the sound blending with the tavern's noise. Cordelia's legs gave out. She had to brace herself against the pillar to keep from collapsing completely. Her hand pressed over her mouth to stifle any sound that might escape a sob, a scream. She didn't know which would come first. Months. Her mind struggled to process. 6 months of lies. The kisses in the rose garden. The promises whispered in the stables. The letters she'd kept pressed against her heart, reading them over and over until she'd memorized every word. All lies. All just a careful plan to steal my fortune. And worse, he hadn't been alone in it. There were accomplices. An elaborate scheme. They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. Laughing at her. Calling her foolish, spoiled, a lovesick fool. The pain was physical, a crushing weight in her chest that made breathing impossible. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. Not here. Not in front of them. She had to leave. She had to escape before she completely lost control, before Felix saw her and put that cruel performance into motion. But when she took a step back, the world spun dangerously. No plan. No help. No husband. In 18 hours, her father would discover her gone. In 18 hours, she'd be dragged back to marry Mortimer Blackwell if she was lucky enough to make it back alive. Cordelia looked down at the velvet pouch hidden beneath her cloak, the weight of her mother's jewels suddenly unbearable. Everything she owned in the world. The fortune Felix and his friends planned to steal with false smiles and an elaborate act. They will not have me. The pain began to turn into something else. Something colder, sharper. Anger. Pure, burning anger that dried her tears and hardened something inside her chest. But what could she do now? She turned blindly, stumbling toward the tavern door. She needed air, needed to think, needed to find some solution before it was too late. The cold night air hit her like a slap when she pushed outside. The tears returned, silent and hot, streaming down her face as she walked without direction. I have nothing. I am nothing. I have no one. Her feet stumbled on the uneven stones. Her vision blurred. That was when she collided with someone. The impact was solid, strong enough to make her lose her balance. She was going to fall, going to finally collapse completely. But a hand closed firmly around her arm, stopping her fall. Steady now. The voice was deep, commanding, carrying a weight of authority that made Cordelia freeze instinctively. But there was something else in it too, an unexpected softness. What's happened? If you're still here, stay just a little longer, because what Cordelia does next will change everything. Cordelia kept her eyes tightly shut, unable to bear looking at another human being, unable to face the kindness in a stranger's voice when her world had just shattered. Please, her own voice came out broken, desperate. Please let me go. I need to leave. She tried to pull her arm free, but the hand didn't loosen. It didn't hurt, wasn't violent, but it was firm, unmovable. You're crying, the stranger said. Not a question, an observation stated with absolute certainty. That is none of your concern. Fresh tears spilled over. Please, I need to. Look at me. There was command in those words, but also something that sounded genuinely concerned. Fingers touched gently beneath her chin, applying the slightest pressure to lift her face. For a long moment, Cordelia resisted. She kept her eyes closed, turned her face as much as she could away from that gentle but insistent touch. But finally, too exhausted to keep fighting, she yielded. She opened her eyes. The man before her stole what little breath she had left. He was tall, easily a head and a half above her, with broad shoulders that filled the fine coat he wore. Dark hair fell across his forehead, but it was his eyes that held her captive. Winter gray, studying her face with an intensity that made the world fall away. Now, he said quietly, those gray eyes seeing far too much. Tell me what happened. And Cordelia, with nothing left to lose and nowhere left to turn, opened her mouth and told a complete stranger the truth that would change both their lives forever. Perhaps it was the shock of Felix's betrayal still burning like acid in her veins. Perhaps it was the desperation of having nowhere to go, no one to turn to, with dawn approaching like an executioner. Perhaps it was simply that this stranger was looking at her as if he truly cared about the answer when her own father had never cared enough to ask whether she wanted the arranged marriage at all. The words came before she could stop them. I thought he loved me, Cordelia whispered, her voice breaking into uneven pieces. I risked everything. Everything. I planned my escape for weeks, gathered every coin I owned, every jewel, and I came here to meet him, to run away with him, because I would rather die free than live as the property of a man I despise. She sobbed, wiping her tears furiously, but they kept coming. But he was in there with 2 other men, planning it all. They were going to pretend to help me escape, make me feel safe, and then rob me. Take all my money and leave me abandoned in some distant forest, laughing at me, calling me foolish, saying I was naive and spoiled. It was all a lie. Every promise, every kiss, every letter, all just an elaborate trap to steal from me. The stranger's grip on her arm tightened slightly. Not painful, but firm. And through her tears, Cordelia saw something flash in those winter gray eyes. Something cold and dangerous that should have frightened her, but somehow didn't. Who? The single word came out low, lethal. Who planned this? It doesn't matter. Fresh tears spilled over. Because I still have the same problem I had when I walked into that inn. In 18 hours, my father will discover I'm gone. And in 3 days, I'm supposed to marry Lord Mortimer Blackwell, a man old enough to be my grandfather, whose first 2 wives died under mysterious circumstances. My father sold me to him like livestock to restore our family's standing. She laughed bitterly, the sound edged with hysteria. So you see, I traded one danger for another. Felix would have robbed me and left me with nothing, but at least I'd have been alive. Now I have to go back and face a marriage that will probably kill me within a year. No. The word was absolute, carrying a weight of authority that made Cordelia's breath catch. You don't. She looked up at him, confused. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. His thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away a tear with unexpected gentleness. Tell me this marriage your father arranged. It's contracted but not yet completed? The ceremony is in 3 days. Then the contract can be voided. His eyes held hers with unnerving intensity. If you were already married to someone else. Cordelia's heart lurched. The idea had occurred to her. Of course it was why she'd planned to run away with Felix. A quick marriage at a London registry office would have made her father's contract worthless. But Felix was a lie, and she had no one else. She looked at this stranger, this man whose name she didn't even know, and something reckless ignited in her chest. Something desperate and wild and utterly insane. If you think you know what she's about to do, you're right, and it's going to be magnificent. You, she heard herself say. You could marry me. The stranger went very still. I beg your pardon. The words came faster now, tumbling out in a desperate rush. You're clearly a nobleman. The way you carry yourself, your clothes, your bearing, you have standing, influence. If I married you, my father's contract would be void. He couldn't force me. I'd be beyond his reach. You're asking me to marry you? There was something in his voice she couldn't identify. Surprise, certainly, but also something else. Something that sounded almost like amusement. I'm offering you a transaction. Cordelia's hands went to the hidden pocket in her cloak. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out the velvet pouch, opened it. Torchlight from the street caught on gold and jewels, making them flash like captured stars. This is everything I own. My mother's diamond earbobs. My grandmother's pearl bracelet. A ruby ring that's been in my family for 6 generations. The sapphire necklace I was supposed to wear at my wedding to Blackwell. She thrust the pouch toward him, her voice strengthening through the tears. It's a fortune, and I'll give it all to you, every piece, if you marry me. Tonight. Now. The stranger looked at the jewels, then back at her face, and something shifted in his expression. That hint of amusement grew stronger, mixing with something she couldn't name. A fortune, he repeated softly. I know it sounds insane, Cordelia pressed on. A stranger offering money to marry her. But I don't have a choice. If I'm already married, if I already have a husband, my father can't force me. The contract with Blackwell will be void. I'll be safe. Fresh tears burned her eyes. I just need your name. Your protection. I'm not asking for love or romance or anything else. Just a legal marriage that saves my life. That's all. Please. The stranger studied her for a long moment. Those gray eyes seemed to see straight through her, reading every desperate thought, every broken hope. Then he started to laugh. It wasn't cruel laughter, not mocking, just a low, genuine sound of amusement that made Cordelia's confusion spike into something close to offense. Why are you laughing? Her voice shook. I'm offering you everything I have. I know I'm desperate. I know this is improper, but I'm not laughing at you. He took the pouch, and the casual way he held it, as if the weight meant nothing, as if fortunes were commonplace, should have been a clue. I'm laughing at the irony. What irony? His smile was enigmatic in the moonlight. What if I told you there's something more permanent than a simple registry marriage? Something that would guarantee no one, not your father, not Lord Blackwell, not any other man, could ever claim you. Cordelia's breath caught. More permanent than marriage? How? Among certain families, he said carefully, there are older contracts. Bonds recognized above common law. Once established, they supersede any other legal claim. Your father would have no power to take you from me. Blackwell's contract would be worthless. Hope flared so sharply in Cordelia's chest it hurt. And you know how to create such a bond? Yes. Then do it. The words came out fierce, final. Whatever it is, I accept. I'll sign anything, swear anything. Just please, help me. The stranger's expression softened. You don't even know my name. I don't care. Cordelia lifted her chin, meeting those winter-gray eyes. You've shown me more kindness in 5 minutes than my own father has in 22 years. You're offering me a way out when I had none. Your name doesn't matter. Only your help does. If her courage is breaking your heart, stay with her, because his answer will change everything. Cordelia. He said her name like he was testing the shape of it. That's your name, isn't it? I heard you say it. She nodded. Cordelia, he repeated, softer this time. I'll help you. But I need you to understand what I'm offering isn't a temporary arrangement. It's permanent, binding. Once it's done, it cannot be undone. I understand. Do you? His hands settled on her shoulders, gentle but firm. You're desperate right now, hurt and frightened and running out of options. I won't trap you in something you might regret when you're calmer. I won't regret it. The certainty in her voice surprised even herself. Whatever prison you're offering is better than the one waiting for me at home. At least you asked. At least you're giving me a choice. Something fierce and approving flickered in his eyes. Then we have an agreement. He released her shoulders and turned slightly. Tobias. A figure materialized from the shadows, so smoothly Cordelia gasped. A man in his 30s, dressed in dark, practical clothing, appeared at the stranger's side with the ease of someone who'd been waiting just out of sight. Your G, Tobias began, then stopped abruptly when the stranger shot him a sharp look. Sir, he corrected smoothly. We need witnesses, the stranger said, and a magistrate who can be roused at this hour. Somewhere private. The magistrate on Royal Crescent, Tobias said immediately. He'll accommodate us. Us. The word carried weight Cordelia didn't understand. Who were these men that a magistrate would accommodate them at nearly midnight? Good. The stranger turned back to Cordelia, offering his arm. Come, before you lose your nerve or I lose mine. She took his arm, feeling solid muscle beneath the fine fabric of his coat. You still haven't told me your name. No, he agreed, that mysterious smile returning. I haven't. They walked through Bath's darkened streets, Cordelia, the stranger, and Tobias following at a respectful distance. The moon cast everything in silver, making the world feel unreal, dreamlike. Or perhaps that was just the shock. 12 hours ago, Cordelia had been planning her escape with Felix, believing in love and happy endings. 6 hours ago, she'd been packing her mother's jewels and dreaming of freedom. And now she was walking toward a magistrate's home to marry a man whose name she didn't know. Are you frightened? The stranger asked quietly. Cordelia considered the question honestly. Yes, she admitted. But no more frightened than I've been for the past 3 weeks. At least this fear comes with hope. Hope. He repeated the word like it was precious. Yes, that's what I'm offering you. Hope. And protection. And a choice that's truly yours. They reached Royal Crescent, the famous curved row of townhouses that housed Bath's wealthiest residents. The stranger walked directly to one of the grandest homes and knocked with the confidence of someone who expected to be answered. A sleepy servant opened the door, took one look at the stranger, and went pale. Your Grace, forgive me, I didn't please come in. I'll wake the magistrate immediately. Your Grace. The title rang in Cordelia's ears as they entered the grand foyer. She looked at the stranger with new eyes, pieces clicking into place. The fine clothes. The way Tobias deferred to him. The servant's terrified respect. You're a duke, she breathed. He smiled. Does that change your mind? Cordelia's thoughts spun. She'd just offered a duke her paltry fortune. She'd tried to pay one of the most powerful men in England to marry her. The humiliation should have been crushing. But when she looked into those gray eyes, she saw only warmth. Patience. No mockery at all. No, she said finally. It doesn't change my mind. Does my ignorance change yours? Not even slightly. He tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. In fact, It makes this infinitely more interesting. The magistrate appeared, hastily dressed, eyes wide with shock and something close to fear. Your Grace, how may I serve you? A marriage, the stranger said simply. Immediately. You have the authority to conduct emergency ceremonies, yes? Of course, Your Grace, but… No buts. Prepare the documents. Within minutes, they stood in the magistrate's study. Tobias and another household servant served as witnesses. The marriage document lay on the desk, waiting for signatures. Cordelia stared at the blank lines, her heart pounding. This was it. The moment that would change everything. Last chance. The stranger, her soon-to-be husband, murmured. You can still walk away. She picked up the quill. What's your name? I should at least know that before I sign. His smile was warm in the candlelight. Lucian Ashford. Cordelia wrote her name in careful script, Cordelia Thornwell. Then, with only a moment's hesitation, she signed her new name, Cordelia Ashford. Lucian signed beside her, his handwriting bold and confident. The magistrate's hands shook as he witnessed the document. Congratulations, Your Grace. And Your Grace. He looked at Cordelia with something like awe. You're married. Married. The word felt surreal. They left the magistrate's home as husband and wife. The night had grown colder, but Cordelia barely felt it. She was numb with shock and relief and a dozen other emotions she couldn't name. What happens now? She asked as they walked. Lucian looked down at her, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. Now, he said, I take you somewhere safe. And in the morning, he paused, a mysterious smile curving his mouth. In the morning, you'll learn exactly who you've married. And what that means. Should I be worried? That depends. His smile widened. How do you feel about becoming one of the most powerful women in England? Before Cordelia could process that cryptic statement, Lucian guided her toward a waiting carriage she hadn't noticed before. It was black, elegant, with a crest on the door she couldn't make out in the darkness. Get some rest, he said, helping her inside. Tomorrow is going to be interesting. If you're dying to know what happens when morning comes, you're not alone. Cordelia is about to discover the truth about the man she just married. As the carriage rolled through Bath's empty streets, Cordelia touched the ring on her finger's simple gold, hastily procured, but legal and binding. She'd escaped Felix's betrayal. She'd voided her father's contract. She was married to a duke whose full identity she still didn't understand. And somehow, impossibly, she felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The inn was nothing like the White Hart where Cordelia's world had shattered hours earlier. This was the kind of establishment where wealthy travelers stayed discreet, elegant, with thick carpets that muffled footsteps and servants who knew how to be invisible. Lucian had requested 2 rooms. I won't presume, he'd said quietly as the innkeeper who'd gone as pale as the magistrate upon seeing him scurried to prepare their accommodations. Despite the marriage, you need space. Safety. A chance to breathe. Now Cordelia stood in the center of her room, still wearing her traveling cloak, still clutching the velvet pouch of jewels Lucian had handed back to her with a small smile. Keep them, he'd said. They're yours. But I offered them to you. As payment. And I'm choosing not to accept payment for helping someone who needed help. His gray eyes had been gentle. Keep your mother's jewels, Cordelia. You might want them someday. There was a soft knock at the connecting door between their rooms. May I come in? Lucian's voice carried through the wood. Just to talk. I promise. Cordelia's hands trembled as she opened the door. She didn't know why he'd been nothing but kind. But the reality of what she'd done was starting to settle like stones in her stomach. I married a stranger. A duke. I don't even know his full title. Lucian entered, and somehow the room seemed smaller with him in it. He'd removed his coat, rolled up his shirt sleeves. The casual gesture made him seem more human, less like the untouchable nobleman whose name had made a magistrate's hands shake. Sit, he said gently, gesturing to the chair by the fire. Please. You look ready to collapse. She did as he asked, and he took the chair opposite, keeping a respectful distance. The firelight played across his features' strong jaw, dark hair falling across his forehead, those winter-gray eyes that seemed to see everything. "Are you all right?" he asked. The question was so simple, so genuinely concerned, that Cordelia felt tears prick her eyes again. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know what I am." "You're safe." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "That's the most important thing. Whatever else happens, you're safe now." "Am I?" Cordelia looked at her hands, twisted together in her lap. "I just married a man I don't know. For all I know, I've traded one prison for another." "You haven't." Lucian leaned forward, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I won't lie and say this marriage won't come with complications. My life is complicated. But I swear to you, Cordelia, you will never be a prisoner. Not to me. Not to anyone. Not ever again." Something in his voice made her look up. There was a fierceness in his eyes that stole her breath. "Why?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this? Help a desperate stranger? Marry someone you don't know?" Lucian was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, Bath slept, unaware that within these walls, a baron's daughter had just become a duchess. "Because," he said finally, "I know what it's like to be trapped by circumstances you didn't choose. And because—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "Because when you looked at me with tears on your face and offered me everything you had, I saw something rare. Courage. Real, desperate courage." He smiled slightly. "You could have given up, gone back to your father, accepted your fate. But instead, you made a reckless, impossible proposal to a stranger in the dark. That kind of courage deserves to be rewarded, not exploited. If his words are making you believe in good men again, imagine how Cordelia feels hearing them." Cordelia felt something crack in her chest, the armor she'd built around her heart after Felix's betrayal. "I thought he loved me," she whispered. "Felix, I thought what we had was real. I know. 6 months of lies." The tears came now, silent and hot. "Every kiss, every promise, every letter I kept pressed against my heart. All just a plan to rob me. How could I have been so foolish?" "You weren't foolish." Lucian's voice was firm. "You were hopeful. There's a difference. Hope made me weak. Hope made you brave enough to risk everything for a chance at freedom." He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and when she didn't pull away, his fingers brushed the tears from her cheek. "Felix betrayed that hope. But hope itself isn't the problem. He is." Cordelia closed her eyes, leaning into the warmth of his touch. It felt nothing like Felix's calculated gentleness. This felt solid, real. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "When morning comes and the shock wears off. Tomorrow, you face your father with a marriage certificate that voids his contract. You tell him you're beyond his reach." Lucian's thumb traced her cheekbone. "And I'll be standing beside you when you do it. He'll be furious. Let him be." There was steel beneath the gentleness now. "His fury is meaningless. You're my wife now, under my protection. Anyone who wants to harm you will have to go through me first." The possessiveness in his words should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel safe for the first time in weeks. "I don't even know your full title," she admitted. "The magistrate called you your grace, but beyond that." Lucian smiled enigmatically. "Does it matter tonight?" "I suppose not." Exhaustion was pulling at her now, making her limbs heavy. "Though I feel I should know more about the man I've married. You'll know everything tomorrow. I promise." He stood, and Cordelia felt the loss of his presence like cold water. "But tonight, you need rest. Real rest. When was the last time you slept without fear?" She couldn't remember. "Sleep," Lucian said gently. "I'll be in the next room if you need anything." "And Cordelia?" He paused at the connecting door. "Thank you." "For what?" "For trusting me, even when you had no reason to." His smile was soft. "It's a gift I don't take lightly." He closed the door, leaving her alone with the fire and her tangled thoughts. Cordelia changed into the nightgown the inn had provided, washed her face, and climbed into bed. The sheets were clean and soft. The room was warm. She was safe. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Felix's cruel smile, heard his mocking laughter, felt the gut punch of betrayal all over again. Another soft knock on the connecting door. "Cordelia?" Lucian's voice was concerned. "I can hear you crying." She hadn't realized she was. But now that he'd said it, she felt the tears on her face, tasted salt on her lips. "I'm fine," she lied. "No, you're not." A pause. "May I come in? I just want to help." She should say no. She was married to this man. Yes, but she barely knew him. Letting him into her room, into her vulnerability, was dangerous. But she was so tired of being alone with her pain. "Yes," she whispered. Lucian entered, and without a word, he pulled the chair close to her bedside and sat. "Tell me what you need." "I don't know." Fresh tears spilled over. I can't stop seeing his face. Hearing him laugh at me. I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid." Lucian's voice was fierce. "You're human. You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That's his failing, not yours." "But how do I know?" Her voice broke. "How do I know I'm not making the same mistake with you? How do I know this isn't another trap?" If you're asking yourself the same question, you're feeling exactly what Cordelia is, and that's what makes this real. Lucian was quiet for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He took her hand, the one with the simple gold ring, and placed it over his heart. She could feel it beating, steady and strong beneath her palm. "You don't know," he said honestly. "Not yet. Trust isn't built in a night, Cordelia. It's built in moments, in choices, in actions that prove words true." His gray eyes held hers. "So I'm not going to ask you to trust me completely. Not yet. But I'm asking you to let me prove myself worthy of it." "How?" "By being here. By keeping my promises. By standing between you and everyone who wants to hurt you." His hand covered hers, warm and solid. "Starting tomorrow, when we face your father. And ending, well, hopefully never ending." Despite everything, Cordelia felt a small smile tug at her lips. "You're very confident." "I'm very determined." He smiled back. "There's a difference." She left her hand over his heart, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. It was grounding. Real. This man, this Duke, whose full identity she still didn't understand, was real. His kindness was real. "Will you stay?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Not in the bed. Just in the chair. "I don't want to be alone with my thoughts." "Of course." Lucian settled back in the chair, his hand still holding hers. "Sleep," he said softly. "I'll be here when you wake. Promise." "Promise." Cordelia closed her eyes. And with the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm, the warmth of his hand around hers, she finally slept. She woke once in the deep of night, disoriented. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. Felix's betrayal, the stranger in the street, the midnight marriage. Lucian was still there. He'd dozed off in the chair, his head tilted back, dark hair falling across his forehead. His hand still held hers loosely, even in sleep. The firelight cast shadows across his face, softening the hard lines, making him look almost vulnerable. "Who are you?" she wondered, studying him. What kind of duke marries a desperate stranger out of kindness? As if sensing her gaze, Lucian's eyes opened. For a moment, they were unfocused, still caught in sleep. Then they sharpened, focusing on her face. "Bad dream?" he asked quietly. "No. Just..." She gestured helplessly. "Processing." "That's fair." He sat up straighter, rolled his shoulders. "It's been quite a night. The strangest of my life." "Mine too," he admitted, though perhaps for different reasons. Before she could ask what he meant, he stood, stretched. Dawn was beginning to lighten the windows. "I should let you rest properly. In a few hours, we'll need to face the day." "Lucian." She sat up, pulling the blankets around herself. "Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. For tonight. For staying." His smile was gentle. Always. He left through the connecting door, and Cordelia lay back down, her hand going to the ring on her finger. Cordelia Ashford. That was her name now. Wife to a duke. Protected. Safe. But as sleep pulled at her again, one question burned in her mind. Who exactly had she married? And why did everyone who looked at him seem so afraid? She'd find out soon enough. The morning sun would bring answers. And with them, everything would change. Cordelia woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of complete disorientation. The in-room. Bath. The marriage. Oh God. The marriage. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from the tension of the previous night. The connecting door between rooms was closed. The fire had burned down to embers. And on the small table by the window sat a tray tea, toast, preserves that someone had delivered while she slept. Beside it, a note in bold handwriting. Good morning, wife. I've gone to handle some arrangements. Stay here until I return. You're safe. Wife. The word looked strange written out like that. Permanent. Real. Cordelia touched the gold ring on her finger, still unable to fully process what she'd done. 12 hours ago, she'd been planning to run away with Felix. Now she was married to a duke whose last name she barely remembered and whose first name she'd only learned while signing the marriage certificate. Ashford. Lucian Ashford. The name meant nothing to her. But then again, Cordelia's education had focused on watercolors and pianoforte, not the peerage. Her father had never considered it necessary for her to know about powerful families beyond the ones he intended to use her to infiltrate. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. My lady. A familiar voice, trembling with relief. My lady, are you in there? Nell. Cordelia hurried to the door, unlocking it. Her maid practically fell into the room, her round face blotchy with tears. Oh, thank God. Nell threw her arms around Cordelia with complete impropriety. I've been searching half the night. When you didn't come back to where I was waiting, when I saw you leave with that gentleman, I didn't know if you were safe or. I'm safe. Cordelia hugged her back, feeling guilty for the worry she'd caused. I'm more than safe. Nell, I'm married. The maid pulled back, eyes wide. What? The gentleman who helped me. How did she even explain this? He married me. Last night. By special license. Nell's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. But my lady, you don't even know him. Who is he? What's his name? Lucian Ashford. Cordelia moved to the tea tray, suddenly desperate for something to do with her hands. He's a duke. A duke? Nell's voice pitched up. My lady, which duke? There aren't many. And the ones that exist, they're the most powerful men in England. I don't know which one. He didn't exactly provide a full introduction before I proposed to him. Cordelia poured tea with shaking hands. But everyone who sees him treats him with fear. Respect. Something. My lady. Nell's voice had gone very quiet. Very serious. What exactly happened last night? So Cordelia told her. All of it. Felix's betrayal overheard at the White Hart. The collision with Lucian in the street. Her desperate proposal. The midnight marriage. Waking with his hand holding hers. By the time she finished, Nell had gone pale. You offered a duke your mother's jewels as payment to marry you? I didn't know he was a duke at the time. Cordelia set down her teacup before she could drop it. I thought he was just a wealthy gentleman. Someone with enough standing to void my father's contract. Oh, my lady. Nell pressed her hands to her face. Oh no. We need to find out who he is. Immediately. Why? He's been nothing but kind. Because dukes aren't kind without reason. Nell was already moving toward the door. They're the most powerful, political, dangerous men in the realm. If one married you out of nowhere, he wants something. We need to know what. If you're feeling the same creeping dread Cordelia is starting to feel, you're not imagining it. Something is coming. Before Cordelia could respond, Nell had slipped out into the hallway. She returned minutes later with an elderly chambermaid who looked like she'd worked at the inn since the Battle of Waterloo. Mrs. Pemberton, Nell said, this is my mistress, Lady Cordelia. She needs information about the gentleman who took these rooms last night. Tall, dark hair, gray eyes. Called himself Ashford. Mrs. Pemberton's face went white as chalk. "Oh my," she breathed. "Oh my stars. You don't mean you can't possibly mean." "What?" Cordelia stood, alarm spiking. "What is it?" "Ashford," Mrs. Pemberton whispered, making it sound like a curse. "There's only one Ashford that matters, miss. Begging your pardon, your grace." She curtsied so low her knees cracked. "If you've married an Ashford, if you're his wife, then you're, oh heavens preserve us, you're the Duchess of Ravenska." The room tilted. Ravenska? Cordelia gripped the back of a chair to stay upright. "What, who?" "The Duke of Ravenska," Mrs. Pemberton said, her voice filled with something between awe and terror. "The wealthiest peer in all of England. They say his fortune could buy and sell half the aristocracy. His estates stretch from Cornwall to the Scottish borders." Nell made a small, strangled sound. Mrs. Pemberton wasn't finished. "But it's not just his wealth, your grace. It's his power. 3 families he's ruined in the past 2 years, completely destroyed them for crossing him. The Earl of Westmore, the Viscount Berkeley, Lord Thorne's entire line. All gone. Estates seized, titles stripped, family names turned to ash." "Why?" Cordelia's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Different reasons, your grace. The Earl was embezzling from his tenants. The Viscount was involved in smuggling. Lord Thorne." Mrs. Pemberton lowered her voice. "Lord Thorne had a taste for young girls. Girls who couldn't say no. So he punishes corruption. He destroys it." Mrs. Pemberton straightened, adjusting her cap. "They call him the Winter Duke. Cold as ice, ruthless as winter frost. No mercy for those he deems unworthy. No forgiveness for those who cross him." The chambermaid curtsied again. "But if he's married you, your grace, if he's claimed you as his duchess, well, that means you're under his protection. And nothing in England is more absolute than that." She left, and the silence that followed was deafening. Nell spoke first. "My lady, your grace, you married the most powerful man in England." "I didn't know." Cordelia's hands were shaking. "I thought he was so kind, so gentle. I didn't think. Men like that are never just anything." Nell gripped her hands. "What does he want from you? Why would the Duke of Ravenska marry a disgraced baron's daughter running from a forced marriage?" Before Cordelia could answer, before she could even begin to process the magnitude of what she'd done, there was another knock at the door. A young man in impeccable livery stood in the hallway. "Your Grace," he said with a deep bow. "I'm Tobias Grayson, secretary to His Grace the Duke of Ravenska. My lord has requested your presence remain here until noon. He's handling arrangements." "Arrangements?" Cordelia's voice sounded foreign to her own ears. "What kind of arrangements?" Tobias hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm not at liberty to say, your grace. But—" He glanced down the hallway, then lowered his voice. "His Grace has called an emergency assembly at the pump room for noon today. Every peer in Somerset has been summoned. It's unprecedented." Cordelia's blood turned to ice. "Emergency assembly? For what?" His Grace didn't specify, but Tobias's expression said he knew exactly what it was for. "All I can tell you is that your father has been summoned. Lord Blackwell has been summoned. Every person of importance in Bath will be there." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. He's going to announce the marriage. Publicly. In front of everyone. "Oh God," Cordelia whispered. Tobias cleared his throat. "His Grace also sent these." He handed her a large box. "For the assembly. He thought you might need appropriate attire for your first public appearance as the Duchess of Ravenska." He left before Cordelia could respond. She opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was the most beautiful dress she'd ever seen, deep emerald silk with intricate beading, clearly worth more than her father's annual income. Beneath it, a note in Lucian's handwriting. "Wear this. Let them see what a duchess looks like. I'll be there to protect you. Always. L. My lady." Nell's voice was small, frightened. "What have you done?" Cordelia sank onto the bed, the dress pooling in her lap. I offered my mother's jewels to the richest man in England and proposed marriage like he was some common gentleman who needed my fortune. The humiliation was crushing. He must have been laughing inside, amused by the desperate baron's daughter who thought her paltry inheritance was worth something to a man who could buy kingdoms. But no, she remembered his face in the moonlight, the gentleness in his touch, the way he'd held her hand while she slept. You offered me everything you had, not knowing I needed none of it. That honesty is rare. He knew, Cordelia whispered. From the beginning, he knew exactly who he was and what I was offering. And he still said yes. But why? Nell asked the question that burned in Cordelia's mind. Why would the Winter Duke, the man who destroys anyone who crosses him, marry you? If you're desperate to know the answer to that question, imagine how terrified Cordelia is not knowing it. Cordelia looked at the emerald dress, the expensive silk that represented a world she'd just been thrust into without warning. In a few hours, she'd face her father, Lord Blackwell, all of Bath society, and they'd all know she was married to the most powerful, dangerous man in England. A man who could destroy her with a single word if he chose. A man whose motives she couldn't begin to understand. Nell, Cordelia said quietly, help me dress. If I'm going to face this, I might as well look like a duchess. Even if she felt like a girl who'd made the most reckless decision of her life. Even if she had no idea whether she'd saved herself or condemned herself to something worse. The clock on the mantel chimed 11. 1 hour until the assembly. 1 hour until her entire world changed again. Cordelia touched the ring on her finger, the simple gold band that bound her to a man called the Winter Duke, and prayed she hadn't made a terrible mistake. The pump room at noon was a vision of Georgian elegance, soaring columns, crystal chandeliers, walls the color of cream and gold. It was where Bath society gathered to see and be seen, to trade gossip over tea, to arrange marriages and ruin reputations with equal efficiency. Cordelia had been here dozens of times in her life. Never like this. The carriage that brought her bore the Ravenska crest, a raven with wings spread over a crown, silver on black. People had stared as it rolled through Bath streets. Some had even bowed. Now, standing in the anteroom with Nell frantically adjusting her dress, Cordelia felt like she might vomit. You look beautiful, my lady, your grace. Nell corrected herself for the dozenth time. The emerald silk fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. The beading caught the light with every breath. Her auburn hair had been swept up, revealing the graceful line of her neck. She looked like a duchess. She felt like a fraud. I can't do this, Cordelia whispered. No, I can't walk in there. My father is in there. Lord Blackwell. Everyone I've known my entire life. They'll all know I ran away. They'll know I'm married to the most powerful man in England. Nell gripped her hands. Who chose you? Remember that, my lady. Whatever else happens in there, he chose you. A door opened. Tobias appeared, his expression professionally neutral. Your Grace. It's time. Cordelia's legs wouldn't move. His Grace is waiting, Tobias added gently. He's asked that you enter separately. He wants. A small smile crossed his face. He wants the reveal to be memorable. If your heart is pounding reading this, imagine how Cordelia's feels right now. Somehow, Cordelia's feet carried her forward, through the anteroom, down a short corridor, to the massive double doors that led into the pump room itself. She could hear voices inside, hundreds of them, the confused murmur of Bath's elite, all summoned by a duke's command, none knowing why. Wait for my signal, Tobias said. Then he opened the doors and stepped inside. The murmur died instantly. Lords and ladies, Tobias's voice rang through the cavernous space. His Grace, Lucian Ashford, Duke of Ravenska. Cordelia heard rather than saw what happened next. The rustle of fabric as hundreds of people bowed or curtsied. The intake of collective breath. The silence that followed, heavy with anticipation and fear. Then Lucian's voice, that deep, commanding voice that had comforted her in the darkness. but now it carried the full weight of his authority, filling the space like thunder. I've called you here regarding a matter of personal importance. Silence. Absolute, breathless silence. Last night, Lucian continued, I married. The gasp was audible. Shocked murmurs erupted, then died quickly, as if everyone remembered who they were dealing with. My wife, Lucian said, and Cordelia heard something shift in his tone, something possessive and fierce, is in this building. And I believe it's time you all met her. Tobias appeared at the door, nodding to Cordelia. This is it. No going back. She stepped through the doorway. The pump room stretched before her like a cathedral. Hundreds of faces turned toward her in unison. At the far end, on a raised dais normally reserved for musical performances, stood Lucian. He wore full, ducal regalia, now black coat, with silver embroidery, waistcoat of midnight blue, cravat tied with precision. His dark hair was swept back from his face. Those winter gray eyes found hers across the distance, and something in them steadied her. Walk. Just walk. Cordelia moved forward. Every eye tracked her progress. She saw faces. She recognized Lady Pemberton, who'd called her poor dear at last season's ball. Lord Ashworth, who'd commented on her father's financial troubles. Mrs. Davenport, who'd gleefully spread gossip about every scandal in Somerset. And there her father, Lord Godfrey Thornwell, stood near the front, his face already red with barely contained fury. Beside him, she saw the man who'd haunted her nightmares for 3 weeks. Lord Mortimer Blackwell, 65 years old, jowls sagging, eyes like dead fish. His gaze traveled over her with the same possessive hunger she remembered from the betrothal dinner, and her stomach turned. Near the servants' entrance, she spotted another familiar face. Felix, dressed in footman's livery, trying to blend into the background. When their eyes met, he had the audacity to wink a conspiratorial gesture that said he still thought she didn't know. Still thought she was the lovesick fool waiting to run away with him. The rage that surged through Cordelia burned away her fear. She reached the dais. Lucian descended the steps to meet her, and when he took her hand, she felt the tremor of barely controlled fury in his fingers. Cordelia, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then, turning to face the assembly, he pulled back the hood of her cloak. Her auburn hair caught the light from the chandeliers. Her face, pale but determined, was visible to everyone. Lady Cordelia Thornwell, Lucian announced. His hand tightened on hers. Now her grace, the Duchess of Ravenska. My wife. The explosion of sound was immediate. Gasps. Shouts. The scrape of chairs as people stood in shock. And cutting through it all, one voice louder than the rest. This is impossible. Her father shoved his way forward, his face purple with rage. Your Grace, there must be some mistake. My daughter is contracted to Lord Blackwell. The wedding is in 3 days. This is impossible. Lucian's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. Contracted, he repeated, his voice silk over steel. Tell me, Lord Thornwell, did your daughter consent to this contract? She's my daughter. Her consent is irrelevant. Wrong answer. Lucian's eyes were ice. Your daughter came to me last night seeking protection from a marriage she did not consent to. A marriage to a man whose previous 2 wives died under, shall we say, suspicious circumstances. Every eye swung to Mortimer, who'd gone gray as ash. I granted her that protection, Lucian continued. Through marriage. Legally binding, properly witnessed, registered with the magistrate. Which means your contract, Lord Thornwell, is void. You can't, her father sputtered. The arrangements, the negotiations, years of planning, mean nothing. The words fell like hammer blows. Your daughter is under my protection now. My wife. My Duchess. And that supersedes any agreement you made on her behalf. If you're cheering for Cordelia right now, don't stop, because it's about to get even better. Godfrey turned on Cordelia, his face twisted with fury. You ungrateful, foolish girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? The shame you've brought on this family. He took a step toward her, arm raised. And Lucian moved. It was so fast Cordelia barely saw it. One moment Lucian was beside her. The next, he was between them, his hand locked around her father's wrist, stopping the blow inches from Cordelia's face. Don't. That single word carried a wealth of lethal promise. Don't ever raise your hand to her again. Godfrey tried to pull free. Lucian's grip didn't budge. She is not your property, Lucian said, his voice low and dangerous. She is not your pawn. She is my wife. And if you touch her, if you so much as speak harshly to her, I will destroy you. He released Godfrey's wrist with enough force to make the older man stumble backward. Is that clear, Lord Thornwell? Her father had gone pale. Everyone in the room had witnessed it. The threat. The absolute, uncompromising protection. Yes, Godfrey whispered. Your Grace. Perfectly clear. Lucian turned to Mortimer, who seemed to be trying to disappear into the crowd. As for you, Lord Blackwell, your contract is void. I suggest you leave Bath immediately. Now see here, Mortimer's bluster died when Lucian's eyes locked on him. I've been investigating you, Lucian said conversationally. Did you know that? For 3 months now. Ever since I heard whispers about your first wife's death. Arsenic poisoning, I believe. Though it was ruled natural causes at the time. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Your second wife, Lucian continued relentlessly, also died of natural causes. How convenient. How tragic. His smile was cold enough to freeze blood. I have doctors willing to testify, evidence willing to damn you, and magistrates willing to issue warrants. Mortimer's face had gone from gray to green. You can't prove. I can prove everything. Lucian's voice hardened. The only reason you're not in chains right now is because I wanted witnesses. Wanted everyone here to know exactly what kind of man Lord Thornwell was trying to sell his daughter to. He turned, addressing the entire room. A murderer. Twice over. And he would have made her his third victim. Cordelia felt tears burn her eyes. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief of being believed. Being protected. Being worth protecting. Lucian looked back at Mortimer. Leave. Now. Before I change my mind and have you arrested anyway. Mortimer fled. Actually ran, his expensive shoes slipping on the polished floor, his dignity in tatters. The room was utterly silent. Then Lucian turned to the crowd, his eyes scanning until they found a figure near the servants' entrance. Felix Hartley. Step forward. Felix went rigid. For a moment, Cordelia thought he might run too. But pride or stupidity kept him frozen. Step forward. Command, not request. Felix moved into the open, and Cordelia saw the exact moment he realized his plan had crumbled. His confident smirk vanished, replaced by dawning horror. Tell me, Mr. Hartley, Lucian said pleasantly. What were your plans for last night? I don't know what your grace means. Let me refresh your memory. Lucian gestured, and Tobias produced a man Cordelia recognized the innkeeper from the White Hart. This gentleman heard an interesting conversation. Why don't you tell everyone what you heard? The innkeeper cleared his throat nervously. 3 men at a table, your grace. Laughing about a desperate lady who was going to give them all her gold. They planned to pretend to help her escape, then rob her and leave her abandoned in Thornwood Forest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One of those men, the innkeeper continued, pointing, was him. Felix Hartley. He said, begging your pardon. Your grace, he said the lady was a lovesick fool who believed he loved her. Cordelia felt Lucian's hand find hers again, squeezing gently. Felix had gone white. That's not it was just talk, your grace. We weren't actually going to. My wife, Lucian interrupted, his voice deadly calm. Overheard your entire plan. Every cruel word. Every mocking laugh. She came to me in tears, betrayed by the man she'd trusted with her heart and her future. He paused, letting that sink in. Do you know what I do to men who hurt what's mine? If you're not crying yet, you will be because Cordelia is about to get the justice she deserves. Felix's bravado crumbled completely. Your grace, Please, I'm sorry, I didn't know she was. I never would have. You never would have what? Cordelia's voice surprised everyone, including herself. She stepped forward, looking Felix directly in the eyes. You never would have lied to me, manipulated me, planned to rob me, and abandoned me to die in a forest. Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice was steady. You made me believe love was real. You kissed me and called me brave. You wrote me letters promising salvation. She pulled a crumpled paper from her sleeve, one of his love letters, carried against her heart for months. Were any of the words in this true? Any of them? Felix couldn't meet her eyes. I thought so. Cordelia's voice broke, but she pushed on. You called me a fool, and maybe I was foolish to trust you. But you know what? I learned something from your betrayal. She stepped closer, and Felix actually flinched. I learned that even at my lowest, even when I had nothing, I still had the courage to choose my own fate. I made a desperate proposal to a stranger, offered everything I had, and risked everything for a chance at freedom. She turned, finding Lucian's eyes. And that stranger saw me, not as a fool, not as a target, but as someone worth saving, worth choosing, worth protecting. Her voice strengthened. So thank you, Felix. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. Because if you hadn't, I never would have found him. The room was utterly silent. Several women were openly crying. Lucian moved to her side, his arms sliding around her waist. Felix Hartley, you and your accomplices are banished from all lands under Ravenska jurisdiction. You have 24 hours to leave Somerset. If you're found here after that, you'll be arrested for conspiracy to commit theft and attempted harm of a duchess. But your grace, my family, my home, should have thought of that before plotting to destroy an innocent woman. Lucian's voice was final. Guards, escort him out. 2 footmen appeared from nowhere, taking Felix by the arms. As they dragged him toward the door, he looked back at Cordelia one last time. She felt nothing. No love, no pain, not even satisfaction. Just emptiness where he used to live in her heart. And that felt like freedom. When the doors closed behind Felix, Lucian turned to address the room one final time. Let this serve as a lesson. The Duchess of Ravenska is under my absolute protection. Anyone who threatens her, harms her, or plots against her will answer to me personally. He pulled Cordelia closer. And I promise you, I am not merciful to my enemies. The threat hung in the air, clear and uncompromising. Then Lucian's expression softened as he looked down at Cordelia. But to those who honor her, who respect her, who treat her with the dignity she deserves, you will find me a generous ally. He addressed her father directly. Lord Thornwell, your daughter is lost to you by your own choices, but she may choose to allow you contact in the future, on her terms, with her consent. Until then, you will not approach her. Is that understood? Godfrey nodded, looking 10 years older than he had an hour ago. Good. Lucian offered Cordelia his arm. Come, my dear. I believe we've provided enough entertainment for one day. As they walked toward the exit, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Some faces showed shock. Others showed envy. A few showed genuine happiness for her. But all of them showed respect. Because she wasn't just Lady Cordelia Thornwell anymore. She was the Duchess of Ravenska, wife to the most powerful man in England. Protected, valued, chosen. If you're crying tears of joy for Cordelia right now, you're not alone, she's crying them too. Outside, the autumn sun felt warm on her face. The carriage waited, the Ravenska crest gleaming silver and black. Lucian helped her inside, then climbed in after her. As the carriage pulled away from the pump room, away from her father, away from Mortimer, away from Felix, and all the pain they represented, Cordelia finally let herself break. The sobs came hard and fast, wrenching through her body. But these weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief, so intense it hurt in a completely different way. Lucian pulled her into his arms, letting her cry against his chest. You're safe, he murmured into her hair. You're safe, and you're mine, and no one will ever hurt you again. You destroyed them, she gasped between sobs. You destroyed everyone who tried to hurt me. Of course I did. He tilted her face up, brushing tears away with his thumbs. You're my wife, Cordelia. My Duchess. Protecting you isn't a choice, it's an absolute necessity. She looked into those winter-gray eyes and saw the truth there. The fierce possessiveness. The genuine care. The promise that this, unlike everything with Felix, was real. I don't deserve you, she whispered. You deserve everything. His voice was fierce. And I intend to spend the rest of our lives proving it to you. He kissed her then, not gentle, not tentative, but claiming. Possessive. A promise sealed with lips and breath and the weight of everything that had just happened. When they broke apart, Cordelia was breathless. What happens now? Lucian smiled, and it transformed his face from winter cold to genuinely warm. Now, wife, I take you home, to Ravenska Hall, and we begin our life together. Together, Cordelia repeated, testing the word. After so many years of being alone, of being nothing but a pawn in her father's games, the word felt foreign. Precious. Together, Lucian confirmed. Always. As the carriage rolled toward Cornwall, toward Ravenska Hall, toward a future Cordelia couldn't have imagined 24 hours ago, she leaned against her husband's shoulder and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, solid hope. Built not on lies and pretty promises, but on actions. On protection. On a man who'd stood before all of Bath society and claimed her as his own. She'd needed a husband by morning to escape a nightmare. She'd found a partner who'd burned her nightmares to ash and offered her a kingdom instead. The journey from Bath to Cornwall took 3 days. 3 days of staying at inns where innkeepers fell over themselves to serve the Duke and Duchess of Ravenska. 3 days of Nell fussing over Cordelia's dresses while trying not to stare at Lucian with terrified awe. 3 days of Cordelia sitting across from her husband in the carriage, learning the shape of silence between two people who'd married as strangers and were now trying to become something more. On the first day, she'd asked him questions. Small things. Safe things. How old are you? 32. Do you have family? A pause, something painful crossing his face. A sister. Elena. She died 3 years ago. I'm sorry. So am I. On the second day, she told him about her mother. How she died when Cordelia was 12. How her father had been different before, warmer, kinder, until grief had frozen him into something cold and calculating. He wasn't always like this, she'd whispered, watching the countryside roll past. The man who sold me to Mortimer. That's not the father I remember. Grief changes people, Lucian had said quietly. Sometimes it makes them better. Sometimes it makes them bitter. He'd reached across the carriage, taking her hand. But his grief doesn't excuse what he did to you. On the third day, they barely spoke at all. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy with unasked questions and unspoken truths. Now, as the carriage crested a hill and the driver called out, Ravenska Hall ahead, Your Grace. Cordelia felt her breath catch. The estate sprawled across the cliff tops like something from a Gothic novel. Gray stone walls rose 4 stories high, covered in ivy that had been there for centuries. Towers flanked each corner, their crenellations sharp against the autumn sky. Behind the house, the land dropped away to jagged cliffs, and beyond that the sea. Endless, restless, beautiful. Oh, Cordelia breathed. Lucian washed her face. It's not as grand as some estates. No Palladian symmetry or classical columns. Just old stones and older ghosts. It's magnificent. It's home. Something in his voice made her look at him. Our home now. Our home. The words settled into Cordelia's chest like warm stones. The carriage swept up the circular drive. Before it had even stopped, the front doors opened and staff poured out, dozens of them, all in impeccable livery, all arranging themselves in perfect lines. They're excited to meet you, Lucian said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I've been a bachelor for 32 years. They'd given up hope of ever having a duchess to serve. The head butler, a dignified man in his 60s with kind eyes, stepped forward as Lucian helped Cordelia down from the carriage. "Your Grace," he said, bowing to Lucian. Then, turning to Cordelia with genuine warmth, "Your Grace. Welcome to Ravenska Hall. I'm Hartwell, and it is my great honor to serve as your butler." "Thank you, Hartwell." Cordelia's voice came out smaller than she intended. So many eyes watching her. So many people whose livelihoods now depended on her being a proper duchess. What if I'm not enough? What if I fail them all? As if sensing her anxiety, Lucian's hand settled at the small of her back. "Hartwell, please introduce the staff. And let's keep it brief. Her Grace has had a long journey." The introductions blurred together. Mrs. Thistle, the housekeeper, with flowers still on her apron from preparing welcome cakes. Davies, the head gardener, whose weathered hands spoke of decades tending Ravenska's grounds. Sarah and Mary, the upstairs maids, who giggled and curtsied so enthusiastically they nearly fell over. And then, at the end of the line, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and a face that radiated maternal warmth. "This is Mrs. Bancroft," Lucian said, and something in his voice softened. "She was my nurse when I was a boy. And Elena's." She stayed on as family, really. Mrs. Bancroft curtsied, but her eyes were damp. "Your Grace," she said to Cordelia, "I cannot tell you how happy we all are. His Grace has been alone too long. Far too long." The genuine affection in her voice made Cordelia's throat tighten. "Come," Lucian said, guiding her toward the entrance. "Let me show you your home. If you're feeling overwhelmed by all this grandeur, imagine how Cordelia feels walking into a life she never dreamed possible." Ravenska Hall was everything the exterior promised and more. Soaring ceilings with painted frescoes. Marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. Portraits of Ashford ancestors lining the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow Cordelia as she passed. "The Grand Hall," Lucian said, gesturing to a cavernous room with a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. "The music room. The library, which I think you'll love. It has over 10,000 volumes. The morning room, the drawing room, the dining hall." Each room was more magnificent than the last. Cordelia tried to memorize it all, tried to imagine herself living here, belonging here. "And this," Lucian said, opening a set of double doors, "is the Duchess's suite." Cordelia stepped inside and forgot how to breathe. The rooms were beautiful, feminine without being frivolous, elegant without being cold. Pale blue walls, cream curtains that filtered afternoon light into something soft and golden. A sitting room with a fireplace and comfortable chairs. A dressing room lined with empty wardrobes waiting to be filled. And beyond that, a bedroom with a four-poster bed draped in silk. "The Duke's chambers are through there," Lucian said, pointing to a connecting door. "But these rooms are yours alone. Your private sanctuary. No one enters without your permission. Not even me." He moved to the windows, pulling back the curtains to reveal a view that stole what little breath Cordelia had left. The cliffs, the sea, waves crashing against rocks in endless rhythm. "Elena loved this view," he said quietly. "She'd sit here for hours, watching the water. She said it reminded her that the world was bigger than whatever was troubling her." Cordelia moved to stand beside him. What happened to her? She fell in love. The words came out bitter. With a fortune hunter who saw her title and her brother's wealth and decided she was his path to easy living. He courted her beautifully, said all the right things, made all the right promises. "Like Felix," Cordelia whispered. "Like Felix." Lucian's jaw tightened. By the time I discovered what he really was, she'd already eloped with him. He took her inheritance, gambled it away in a year, then left her destitute in London. She was too ashamed to come home, too proud to admit she'd been wrong. Oh God, I found her eventually, brought her back here. But the shame, the betrayal, the loss had ate at her. She grew thinner, quieter. And then one morning, his voice broke. One morning, she walked out onto those cliffs and didn't come back. Tears streamed down Cordelia's face. Lucian, I'm so sorry. She was 23 years old. He turned away from the window, and Cordelia saw the raw pain in his eyes. 23, and destroyed by a man who saw her as nothing but a means to wealth. Is that why? Cordelia's voice shook. Is that why you helped me? Because I reminded you of her. No. Lucian moved closer, cupping her face with both hands. You reminded me of what I couldn't save. But you're not Elena, Cordelia. You're stronger than she was. Braver. When Felix betrayed you, you didn't break. You fought. You made an impossible choice in an impossible moment, and you survived. His thumbs brushed away her tears. That's why I helped you. Not because you needed saving, but because you deserved to be saved. And because he paused, something vulnerable flickering in those winter-gray eyes. Because when you looked at me in that dark street and offered me everything you had, I saw something I thought I'd never find. What? Honesty. Real, desperate honesty. No games, no manipulation, no calculating what I could offer you. He smiled slightly. Just a terrified woman who needed help and was brave enough to ask a stranger for it. Cordelia's heart hammered against her ribs. But you could have just helped me. Paid for my passage to London, given me money. You didn't have to marry me. No, he agreed. I didn't have to. I chose to. Why? If you're desperate to hear his answer, so is Cordelia, and what he says next will change everything. Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then he released her face and moved to the fireplace, staring into flames that hadn't yet been lit. Because I've spent 3 years investigating men like Felix and Mortimer. Men who prey on vulnerable women, who use love as a weapon, who destroy lives for profit or pleasure. He turned back to her. I've ruined them. Every single one. Stripped their titles, seized their estates, ensured they could never hurt anyone again. But it never felt like enough. Because no matter how many I destroyed, I couldn't bring Elena back. And then I collided with you. Cordelia whispered, understanding dawning. And then you collided with me. His smile was sad. And you were running from the exact same kind of man. 2 of them. Actually a fortune hunter and a murderer. And I thought. His voice roughened. I thought, here's my chance. Here's someone I can actually save. Someone who still has a chance at a future. He crossed back to her. So yes, I married you. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because you deserve to be protected. And because he paused, searching her face. Because something in me recognized something in you. Something that said, this one matters. This one you keep. Cordelia couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The raw honesty in his words was overwhelming. I know you married me out of desperation, Lucian continued softly. I know you had no choice. And I know that now that you're safe, now that the danger has passed, you might regret it. I don't. Let me finish. His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek. If you want to leave, if you want this marriage to be in name only, if you want separate lives under the same roof, I'll accept that. I'll give you whatever distance you need. Because I won't trap you, Cordelia. I won't make you feel like you've traded one prison for another. He took a shaky breath. But if you're willing, if you can find it in yourself to trust again, I'd like to try. Really try. To make this marriage real. Not because you're trapped, but because you choose it. Choose me. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in Cordelia's chest. What if I can't? She whispered. What if Felix broke something in me that can't be fixed? What if I don't know how to trust anymore? Then we'll figure it out together. Lucian's smile was gentle. I'm patient, Cordelia, and I'm not going anywhere. So we take it slow. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Until you're certain. Cordelia looked into his eyes, those winter-gray eyes that had seen her at her lowest, and chosen to lift her up anyway. This man who'd destroyed her enemies without hesitation, who'd given her a kingdom without asking for anything in return, who was standing here now, offering her not demands, but choices. I want to try, she heard herself say. I want to believe this is real. It is real. His voice was fierce. I promise you, Cordelia, whatever this is between us, it's real. But I'm afraid. The admission came out broken. I'm afraid of being fooled again, of trusting someone who's only pretending. Then test me. Lucian took her hands. Ask me anything. Demand proof. Set boundaries and watch me respect them. I'll prove it to you, Cordelia. Every single day. For as long as it takes. If your heart is breaking for both of them, for Lucian's loss and Cordelia's fear, stay with them. Because healing takes time, but it starts here. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Bancroft's voice came through, apologetic. Your Grace? Forgive the intrusion, but dinner is ready. And I thought Her Grace might want to rest before the meal. Lucian called back. Thank you, Mrs. Bancroft. We'll be down within the hour. He turned to Cordelia. Rest. Washington Nell will help you change. And then, a small smile. Then we'll have our first dinner as husband and wife. In our home. He moved toward the connecting door to his own chambers, but Cordelia's voice stopped him. Lucian. Yes. Thank you. The words felt inadequate for everything he'd given her. For all of it. For believing me. For protecting me. For giving me this chance. Something soft and warm crossed his face. You don't need to thank me for doing what any decent man should do. But most men wouldn't have. Then most men are fools. He smiled. Rest, Cordelia. I'll see you at dinner. He left through the connecting door, and Cordelia sank into one of the chairs by the fireplace. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. And tears were streaming down her face again, but these weren't tears of pain. They were tears of something she was almost afraid to name. Hope. Real hope. Built on a foundation of honest words and protective actions. Built on a man who'd lost his sister to betrayal and refused to let history repeat itself. Nell bustled, and moments later, her arms full of dresses. Oh, my lady, your grace, this place. It's like a palace. And the staff is so kind. And Mrs. Bancroft said I'm to have my own room. And she stopped, seeing Cordelia's tears. Are you all right? I think so. Cordelia wiped her eyes. I think I might actually be safe, Nell. Of course you're safe. Nell set down the dresses and hugged her. You're married to the most powerful man in England. No one would dare hurt you now. But that wasn't what Cordelia meant. She meant safe in a different way. Safe to feel. Safe to hope. Safe to maybe, possibly, one day trust again. She looked at the connecting door to Lucian's chambers. Somewhere beyond it, her husband was preparing for dinner. The man who'd married her to save her. Who'd given her choices when everyone else had only given her ultimatums. Who'd asked her to try. And Cordelia, for the first time since Felix's betrayal shattered her world, wanted to try. Not because she had to. Not because she had no other options. But because something in her recognized something in him. Something that whispered, this one's different. This one's real. This one you keep. Dinner that night was intimate, just the two of them in a small dining room with a fire crackling and candles casting dancing shadows. Lucian had changed into evening clothes. Cordelia wore one of the dresses he'd provided, sapphire blue silk, that made her feel like someone else. Someone worthy of sitting across from a duke. They talked about small things. The estate. The tenants. The upcoming harvest festival that Ravinska hosted every year. You'll need to attend as Duchess, Lucian said, watching her over his wine glass. The tenants will expect it. I don't know how to be a duchess, Cordelia admitted. Neither did I know how to be a duke when my father died. He smiled. We'll learn together. Together. That word again. Warm and solid and full of promise. After dinner, Lucian walked her back to her chambers. At the door he paused. Good night, Cordelia. Good night, Lucian. He lifted her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles, proper, respectful, nothing more. Sleep well. You're safe here. I promise. She watched him disappear into his own chambers. Then she prepared for bed, let Nell help her into a nightgown, and climbed between sheets that smelled of lavender and possibility. Through the connecting door, she could hear Lucian moving around his room, getting ready for bed. So close, yet giving her the space she needed. Respecting her boundaries. Proving himself trustworthy. One choice at a time. Cordelia touched the ring on her finger, and let herself imagine just for a moment what it might be like to choose him. Really choose him. Not out of desperation, but out of want. The thought terrified her, but it also filled her with something dangerously close to excitement. Maybe, she thought as sleep pulled at her, maybe broken things can be healed. Maybe betrayed hearts can learn to trust again. Maybe this marriage could become something real. 3 weeks passed at Ravenska Hall like a strange, beautiful dream. Cordelia spent her mornings learning the estate, walking the grounds with Davies, who taught her the names of every flower in the gardens. She spent afternoons in the library, losing herself in novels while autumn rain drummed against the windows. She had tea with Mrs. Bancroft, who told her stories about Lucian as a boy, about Elena's laughter echoing through these halls. And she spent her evenings with Lucian. They dined together every night. Sometimes they talked about books, about the estate, about nothing and everything. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, reading in the library while the fire crackled between them. He never pushed, never demanded, never crossed the boundaries she'd set. But the tension between them was growing. In the way his eyes lingered when she laughed. In the way her breath caught when his hand brushed hers passing a book. In the way they'd both pause at their chamber doors each night, as if neither quite wanted to say good night. She was healing, slowly, carefully, like a broken bone knitting itself back together. And then the letter arrived. Cordelia was in the morning room, embroidering something that would never be good enough to display, when Hartwell entered with the silver tray. A letter for His Grace, Your Grace. From the magistrate in Bath. Marked urgent. Lucian took the letter, read it, and something cold and satisfied crossed his face. They've arrested them. All 3 of them. Cordelia's embroidery fell from her hands. Felix, and his accomplices, Silas Webb and Roland Finch. Lucian's eyes met hers. The magistrate wants to know if you'll testify. They can't proceed with the full charges without your testimony. The room tilted slightly. Testify? You mean, go back to Bath? Yes. Lucian set down the letter and moved to sit beside her. But only if you want to. I can handle this without you. They have enough evidence to charge them with conspiracy, but with your testimony, they can. Ruin them completely, Cordelia finished. Yes. No apology in his voice. They plan to ruin you. They deserve no less. Cordelia's hands were shaking. The thought of seeing Felix again, of standing in a courtroom and reliving that night, made her stomach churn. But something else burned stronger than fear. The need to speak, to be heard, to look Felix in the eyes and tell him exactly what he'd taken from her and what he'd failed to destroy. I want to testify, she said. I want to face him. If you're proud of her courage right now, imagine how terrified she is underneath it and stay with her as she faces her demons. Lucian's hand found hers. Then we go together. And Cordelia? His voice was fierce. He will never hurt you again. I swear it. The trial went exactly as it should have. Felix and his accomplices were found guilty, sentenced to 14 years transportation to Australia. Cordelia testified with courage that made the courtroom weep. Her father appeared, offered his broken apology, and accepted the boundaries she set. Victory. Complete and total. But as their carriage rolled back into Bath that evening, Lucian made an announcement that changed everything. Lady Pemberton is hosting a ball tomorrow night, he said casually, to celebrate the successful harvest season. I've accepted on our behalf. It's time Bath society properly welcomes the new Duchess of Ravenska. Cordelia's stomach dropped. Tomorrow? But I thought we'd return to Ravenska immediately. This is important. Lucian's tone was firm. You need to be seen. Accepted. Your position needs to be established beyond any doubt. Lucian, I don't think. Trust me. He squeezed her hand. My title will protect you. No one would dare snub a duchess. But he was wrong. The Pemberton ball was a glittering affair. Crystal chandeliers, silk gowns, the cream of Bath society gathered in elegant splendor. Cordelia entered on Lucian's arm, wearing emerald silk that marked her as the wealthiest woman in the room. The whispers started immediately. That's her. The one who ran away. Scandalous. Absolutely scandalous. I heard she was meeting a servant at an inn. A common gamekeeper. And now she's a duchess. Can you imagine? Cordelia felt each word like a slap. Lucian's jaw tightened, but he guided her forward with confidence. Your Grace, Your Grace. Lady Pemberton greeted them with a curtsy that was technically correct, but notably cold. How? Unexpected to see you. We wouldn't miss it, Lucian said smoothly. As they moved into the ballroom, Cordelia watched women she'd known her entire life turn their backs. Literally turn away, presenting their shoulders in the cut direct the social death sentence. Lady Ashworth, who'd once called Cordelia dear girl, stared through her as if she were invisible. Mrs. Davenport whispered loudly to her companion, running away from home like a common trollop. Duchess or not, breeding will tell. Miss Caroline Winters, Cordelia's childhood friend, met her eyes for one brief moment, then looked away, her cheeks flushing with shame. If you're feeling Cordelia's humiliation right now, don't look away because it gets worse before it gets better. Lucian, Cordelia whispered, her voice tight. They're cutting me. All of them. They wouldn't dare, but even as he said it, another group of women turned away, their snubs deliberate and cruel. Your title isn't enough, Cordelia said, fighting tears. Not for this. Not for the scandal of what I did. Then they're fools. Lucian's voice was hard. You're a duchess. My duchess. That should be enough. But it wasn't. And as the evening dragged on, each cut more painful than the last, each whispered insult louder than before, Cordelia realized something devastating. Lucian didn't understand. He'd lived his entire life with absolute power. His title, his wealth, his position, they'd always been enough to command respect. He couldn't comprehend that for a woman, for her, the rules were different, crueler. I want to leave, she whispered. We stay. Lucian's voice was firm. We don't let them win. They've already won. Tears threatened. Can't you see that? Cordelia, please. I want to go home. No. And there it was, command, not request. The Duke speaking, not her husband. We stay until the end. We show them you're not ashamed. But she was ashamed. Not of what she'd done. She'd saved herself, chosen survival over propriety. But of this, of standing in a ballroom full of people who looked at her like she was soiled goods. Of feeling Lucian's frustration that his power couldn't fix this. Of realizing that maybe she'd brought this humiliation on him too. They stayed until the bitter end. Every minute was torture. By the time they reached their inn, Cordelia was shaking. That was necessary, Lucian said as they entered their rooms. Give them time. They'll come around. Will they? Cordelia's voice was hollow. Or will I be the scandal that follows you forever? The duchess who ran away from home, who met a gamekeeper at an inn, who was so desperate she proposed to a stranger in the street. Stop. Lucian's voice was sharp. Don't reduce yourself to their gossip. But that's what I am to them. The words burst out. And maybe they're right. Maybe I've ruined your reputation. Maybe you'd have been better off. Don't. He crossed to her, gripped her shoulders. Don't finish that sentence. But the seed was planted. And as Cordelia lay awake that night in her separate room, she couldn't stop thinking. What if I've destroyed him? What if my scandal brings down the most powerful duke in England? What if the kindest thing I could do is leave before I ruin him completely? The next morning, Cordelia made a decision. She would return to Ravenska, pack her things, and leave quietly before she damaged Lucian's name any further. It was the only way to protect him, even if it broke her heart. Cordelia stood in her chambers at Ravenska Hall, staring at the trunk Nell was packing with trembling hands. My lady, your grace, are you certain about this? The maid's voice shook. His grace will be devastated. He'll be fine. Cordelia's voice was hollow. She'd been repeating the lie for 3 days ever since they'd returned from Bath, ever since that terrible ball where society had cut her to ribbons. He's the Duke of Ravenska. He'll recover from the scandal of a failed marriage far better than he'll recover from being permanently associated with me. But you love him. The words hit like a blade between her ribs. That's exactly why I'm leaving. She'd seen Lucian's frustration after the ball. The way his jaw clenched when another letter arrived from Bath, more whispers, more gossip, more damage to his pristine reputation. He'd try to hide it, but she felt it through every strained conversation, every forced smile. The Winter Duke, they'd called him. Cold, untouchable, perfect. Until he married the scandal. Where will you go? Nell whispered. London. I have a cousin there distant, but she'll take me in. Cordelia folded another dress with mechanical precision. I'll live quietly. Separately. Lucian can tell people the marriage failed, that I was unsuitable. Society will understand. They already think I'm unsuitable anyway. Your Grace. A sharp knock interrupted them. Mrs. Bancroft's voice came through the door, tight with concern. Your Grace? His Grace requests your presence in the library. He says it's urgent. Cordelia's heart lurched. He knows. Somehow he knows. She found Lucian standing by the library windows, staring out at the cliffs. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn when she entered. You're leaving. Not a question. A statement. How did you? Hartwell told me you asked about coach schedules to London. Mrs. Bancroft said Nell was packing your trunks. Now he turned, and the pain in his eyes stole her breath. Were you even going to say goodbye? I was going to leave a letter. The words sounded pathetic even to her. If your heart is breaking watching them fall apart, stay with them because this is where everything changes. A letter. Lucian's laugh was bitter. Of course. That's what people do when they're too cowardly to face the truth. The word hit like a slap. Cowardly? I'm trying to protect you. From what? He crossed the room in 3 strides. From gossip? From scandal? Cordelia, I'm the Duke of Ravenska. I've survived worse than a few gossiping hens in Bath. It's not just gossip. Tears burned her eyes. They cut me. Every single woman in that ballroom turned her back on me. And you stood there acting like your title was enough, like power could fix everything. But it can't. Not this. So your solution is to run away? His voice rose. Again, that's not fair, isn't it? Lucian's eyes blazed. You ran from your father. You ran from Felix. And now you're running from me. When does it stop, Cordelia? When do you finally stand and fight? I'm fighting for you. The words ripped from her throat. Don't you understand? Every day I stay, I damage your reputation more. The perfect Duke of Ravenska, married to the woman who scamlessly ran away from home, who proposed to a stranger in the street, who's probably only after your money anyway. Is that what you think? Lucian's voice dropped to something dangerous. That I care about their opinions? That I regret choosing you? You should regret it. Tears streamed down her face now. At that ball, you were so frustrated. I could see it. You thought your title would be enough to make them accept me, and when it wasn't, you didn't know what to do. Because for the first time in your life, your power couldn't fix something. The silence that followed was crushing. Then Lucian said, very quietly, You're right. Cordelia's breath caught. You're absolutely right. He continued, moving to sit heavily in a chair. I was frustrated. Angry. Not at you, never at you, but at myself. Because I've spent 3 years destroying men who hurt women, thinking that was enough. Thinking power and money and title could solve everything. He looked up at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes shattered something in her chest. But watching them cut you, listening to their whispers, seeing you hurt, and not being able to stop it, his voice cracked. I failed you, Cordelia, just like I failed Elena. And I didn't know how to admit it. Lucian, I made a mistake. The words came out raw. I thought taking you to that ball was the right move. Thought showing Bath society that you're my Duchess would be enough. I was arrogant. Stupid. I didn't consider that you'd bear the brunt of their cruelty while I stood there, untouchable in my title. He stood, crossed to her. I didn't listen when you said you wanted to leave. I gave you an order, stay. Don't let them win like you were a subject instead of my wife. Instead of my equal. Tears slipped down Cordelia's cheeks. You've never treated me as anything less than equal. Until that night, I did. His hands cupped her face gently. And I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. I let my pride, my belief that my power should be enough hurt you. And that is unforgivable. But you're right, too, Cordelia whispered. I was running again. Not because I don't love you, but because I'm terrified. What if I can never be accepted? What if I'm always the scandal? What if I ruin everything you've built? Then we'll be ruined together. Lucian's voice was fierce. But Cordelia, listen to me. I don't care about Bath society. I don't care about gossip or scandal or whether Lady Pemberton ever invites us to another ball. But I care. The admission hurt. I care that they think less of you because of me. I care that I've brought shame to your name. You've brought joy to my life. His thumbs brushed away her tears. You've brought hope and laughter and purpose. You've shown me that love is real, that broken things can heal, that second chances exist. And if the price for that is some gossiping ladies in Bath, then it's a bargain. If you're crying right now, you're not alone, because this is what real love looks like when it's tested. What if they never accept me? Then we'll make our own acceptance. Lucian pulled her closer. Our tenants love you. Our staff adores you. Mrs. Bancroft said yesterday that you've brought more life to Ravenska in 3 weeks than she's seen in 3 years. That matters more than 100 bath balls. But you deserve better than. Stop. His voice was gentle but firm. Stop deciding what I deserve. I chose you, Cordelia. Not because I had to, not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to. And I'm choosing you now, even with the scandal, even with the gossip, even if all of society turns its back. Why? The word came out broken. Because you're brave enough to run when you need to, and brave enough to stay when it matters. Because you've survived betrayal and come out fighting. Because you make me want to be better than the cold, perfect Duke everyone thinks I am. He rested his forehead against hers. Because I love you. All of you. The desperate girl who proposed to me in the street, the fierce woman who testified in court, the Duchess who's terrified of failing me. I love all of it. I love you too, Cordelia whispered. That's why I wanted to leave. To protect you. Protect me by staying. His voice was urgent now. Stay and fight beside me. Not behind me. Not running away beside me. As my equal. As my partner. And together, we'll face whatever comes. What if it's not enough? Then it's still more than I've ever had. Lucian kissed her softly. But I think you'll be surprised. Give it time. Give them a chance to see who you really are, not the scandal, but the woman. The Duchess who visits tenants, who remembers everyone's names, who brought light back to Ravenska Hall. Cordelia closed her eyes, feeling the steady warmth of him, the solid reality of this man who'd saved her and then let her save herself. I'm sorry, she whispered, for planning to leave, for not trusting that we could face this together. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to. He pulled back to look at her. No more orders. No more assuming my power can fix everything. From now on, we decide together. Equal partners. Equal partners, she repeated, testing the words. They felt right. Solid. So, Lucian's smile was tentative. Are you staying? Cordelia thought about the trunk upstairs, about London and living quietly and protecting Lucian's reputation by disappearing. Then she thought about Ravenska, about Mrs. Bancroft's warm smiles and Davies teaching her flower names, and little Emma asking if the baby would play with her, about Lucian holding her while she slept, about healing together, about choosing love even when it was hard. Yes, she said, I'm staying. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to be here, with you, fighting beside you. Even if Bath society never accepts you, even then. She lifted her chin. Because you're right. Their acceptance isn't worth losing this. Losing us. Lucian kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of relief. When they broke apart, he murmured, Besides, I have a plan. What kind of plan? The kind that involves you being exactly who you are and letting Bath society see it. His smile turned mischievous. Lady Pemberton's daughter is getting married next month, and I've arranged for us to host the wedding breakfast at Ravenska. Cordelia's eyes widened. You did what? Invited 200 guests to see our home. To meet the real you, not the scandal, but the Duchess. The woman who remembers every tenant's name and genuinely cares about their lives. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm betting that once they see who you really are, the gossip will die. Because genuine goodness is hard to ignore. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have thrown a magnificent party and won't care what they think anyway. He grinned. But I think it will work. Because you, Cordelia Ashford, are impossible not to love. Even Bath society will figure that out eventually. She laughed despite herself. You have a lot of faith in me. I have exactly the right amount of faith in you. He kissed her forehead. So, will you stay? Will you fight beside me? Will you show Bath society that the Duchess of Ravenska is a force to be reckoned with? Cordelia looked at this man, this imperfect, wonderful man who'd admitted his mistake, who'd apologized, who was offering her true partnership instead of just protection. And she made her choice. Not because she was desperate, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she wanted this. Wanted him. Wanted the life they were building together, scandal and all. Yes, she said firmly. I'll stay. I'll fight. And I'll show them exactly what a duchess looks like. Lucian's smile was brilliant. That's my girl. And as they stood together in the library, holding each other while the sea crashed against the cliffs outside, Cordelia realized something fundamental. Running had saved her once, but choosing to stay and fight, that was saving her too. Just in a different way. 6 months later, May 1852, Cordelia stood at the cliff-top gardens of Ravenska Hall, one hand resting on the swell of her belly, the other shielding her eyes from the spring sun. Below, the sea crashed against ancient rocks in its eternal rhythm. Behind her, the estate hummed with preparations, servants arranging tables, hanging garlands of white roses, preparing for the celebration that would begin at sunset. The harvest festival, her first as Duchess, her first as herself. Your Grace. Mrs. Bancroft approached with a knowing smile. You should be resting, the physician said. The physician says a great many things. Cordelia turned, returning the smile. But the baby and I are perfectly fine. We're just taking it all in. And there was so much to take in. The estate that had felt overwhelming 6 months ago now felt like home. She knew every tenant by name, every child's birthday, every family's struggles. The harvest had been generous, the winter mild, and the people had embraced her with a warmth that still made her throat tight. My lady, Nell called from the terrace. His Grace is looking for you. Cordelia made her way back through gardens she'd helped plan, past rose bushes she'd selected, to the man waiting on the terrace with his arms crossed and his expression hovering between amusement and exasperation. You're supposed to be resting, Lucian said, but his hands were already moving to her belly, feeling for the kick that had become their private language. I was appreciating our home. Our home. He smiled at the word. I like hearing you say that. I like saying it. She covered his hands with hers. Do you remember when you brought me here? I was terrified. I thought I'd made the worst mistake of my life. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else. She looked up at him, this man who'd saved her in more ways than one. With anyone else. If you're feeling the weight of how far she's come, stay with her because the evening is about to bring everything full circle. The festival began at sunset, just as the sky turned the color of honey and amber. Hundreds of tenants filled the estate grounds, farmers and their families, craftsmen, servants, children running wild with flower crowns askew. Musicians played reels while couples danced on the lawn. Long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread, spring vegetables, and enough wine to make the evening memorable. Cordelia moved through the crowd with Lucian at her side, greeting each family personally. Old William, whose granddaughter was getting married next month. Sarah the seamstress, whose arthritis was improving with the medicine Cordelia had arranged. Young Thomas, who'd gotten into university with a sponsorship from the estate. These were her people now. This was her life. Your Grace. A small voice piped up. Little Emma, 7 years old, gap-toothed, fearless, tugged at Cordelia's dress. Is it true you're having a baby? Cordelia knelt down with some difficulty, meeting the girl's eyes. It's very true. In 3 months, you'll have to teach the baby all your best games. Emma's face lit up. I will. I'll teach them everything. She paused, then added with the brutal honesty of children. My mama says you're the bravest lady in England. She says you ran away from a bad man and found a good one instead. Cordelia's throat tightened. Your mama is very kind. She says every girl should be brave like you. That we should choose our own husbands when we grow up. Tears burned behind Cordelia's eyes. This was why it had all mattered. Not just her own salvation, but what it represented. A woman making her own choice. Taking control of her fate. Refusing to be a pawn. Your mama is right, Cordelia said softly. Be brave, Emma. Choose your own path. And never let anyone tell you you're not worth it. Emma nodded seriously, then ran off to join the other children. Lucian helped Cordelia stand. You're crying. Happy tears. She wiped them away. I'm allowed happy tears now. You're allowed anything you want. He pulled her close, one hand protective over her belly. You've earned it. The dancing continued as night fell and stars appeared overhead. Cordelia watched couples twirl past, young lovers stealing kisses, old married couples moving with practiced ease, children imitating their parents with clumsy joy. And then Lucian was leading her onto the dance floor. I can barely move, she protested, laughing. Then we'll move slowly. His arms came around her, careful of her belly, holding her like she was something infinitely precious. I want one dance with my wife. One moment where it's just us. They swayed together under the stars, the music soft around them. And Cordelia thought about that night in Bath, stumbling through dark streets, crying, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to, offering her mother's jewels to a stranger, making an impossible proposal born of pure desperation. She'd been so broken then, so certain her life was over. What are you thinking? Lucian murmured. That I offered you gold. A laugh bubbled up, half tears, half joy. I tried to buy the richest man in England with my mother's pearls. Best investment I never took. He kissed her forehead. You offered me honesty instead. That was worth more than all the kingdoms in the world. If you're crying right now, don't stop, because this is what happens when broken people find each other and build something beautiful from the pieces. The baby kicked hard enough that Lucian felt it. His eyes widened. Was that? That was your child reminding us they're here too. Cordelia laughed through tears. Apparently they approve of dancing. Lucian's hand spread across her belly, reverent and protective. Our child. Our future. Our second chance. It's more than a second chance. Cordelia's voice was fierce now. It's proof that nightmares end. That betrayal doesn't define you. That sometimes, when you're at your absolute lowest, you stumble into exactly what you needed. She pulled back to look at him. Felix wanted to destroy me. My father wanted to use me. Mortimer wanted to kill me. And instead, her voice broke. Instead, I found you. I found home. I found a life worth living. No. Lucian's eyes were suspiciously bright. You created a life worth living. I just gave you the space to do it. The courage was always yours, Cordelia. From that first moment when you made an impossible proposal to a stranger. That was all you. The music swelled. Around them, their people danced and laughed and celebrated. Above them, stars blazed in an endless sky. And between them, their child kicked again, insistent, alive, perfect. I love you, Cordelia whispered. Every day, I love you more. Is that possible? I don't know. Lucian's smile was tender. But I feel the same. So maybe we're both impossible. Good. She kissed him, soft and sweet. I've always preferred impossible things. Later, when the guests had gone home and the estate was quiet, Cordelia stood in her chambers looking at the woman in the mirror. Auburn hair swept up with small white roses woven through it. Green eyes bright with joy instead of tears. A body rounded with new life. A duchess's bearing earned through trial and triumph. This woman looked nothing like the desperate girl who'd fled through Bath streets 6 months ago. That girl had been broken, terrified, convinced her life was ending. This woman knew better. She knew that endings were sometimes beginnings in disguise. That the worst night of your life could lead to the best days. That offering everything you have to a stranger might be the sanest thing you ever do if that stranger is the right one. Lucian appeared in the doorway, watching her. "What are you thinking?" "That I needed a husband by tomorrow," Cordelia said softly. "And I found a soulmate for a lifetime." He crossed to her, turning her to face him. "You saved me too, you know. I was drowning in grief and guilt and the belief that I'd failed Elena. That I'd never be enough to protect anyone. And now I wake up every morning knowing I did right by you. That I stood between you and danger. That I gave you the choice Elena never got." He placed both hands on her belly. "And now we're bringing new life into the world. Life that will know love and choice and freedom from the start." Cordelia covered his hands with hers. "Do you think we'll tell them? Our child. About how we met. Every word." Lucian's smile was fierce. "We'll tell them their mother was the bravest woman in England. That she made an impossible proposal to a stranger and changed both our lives. That she turned tragedy into triumph and showed me what real courage looks like." He kissed her, deep and claiming and full of promise. "And we'll tell them that fairy tales are real. They just don't look the way you expect. Sometimes the princess saves herself. Sometimes the prince is just a man who knows when to help. And sometimes the happy ending starts with the worst night of your life." Cordelia looked out the window at Ravenska, at the cliffs and the sea and the land she now protected as duchess. At the home she'd built from ashes. At the life she'd fought for and won. She'd run because she refused to be handed over like property. She'd stumbled into a stranger who became her salvation. She'd offered gold to a man who needed nothing but gave her everything. And now she stood in a life she'd chosen. With a man who chose her back every single day. With a child growing inside her who would never know what it meant to be powerless. If this story changed you, if Cordelia's courage inspired you, if you believe in second chances and impossible proposals and strangers who turn out to be exactly what you needed, then carry this with you. Because fairy tales are real. They just require more courage than the stories ever mention. "I offered you my mother's jewels," Cordelia said, laughing through tears. "And you gave me a kingdom." "No," Lucian corrected gently. "You already had the kingdom inside you. I just gave you the space to claim it." And as they stood together, looking out at their future at Ravenska Hall, sleeping peacefully under the stars, at the sea that kept its eternal rhythm, at all the tomorrows stretching ahead like promises waiting to be kept, Cordelia understood something fundamental. She hadn't needed a husband by tomorrow. She needed herself. The courage to choose. The strength to survive. The wisdom to recognize real love when it appeared in the darkness. Everything else, the duke, the title, the protection, those were just bonuses. The real victory was simpler and more profound. A girl who'd been told she was nothing had proven she was everything. And that was an ending worth fighting for. She needed a husband by morning. She found a partner for eternity. And in the process, she discovered the most important truth of all. The strongest person who could save her was always herself. You just spent about an hour watching a desperate woman fight for her life, her love, and her future. You cried when Felix betrayed her. You cheered when Lucian destroyed her enemies. You held your breath when she almost left. You celebrated when she chose to stay. That's not casual viewing. That's investment. That's caring. That's being part of something. So here's what I don't understand. You'll invest an hour or more and all those tears into Cordelia's story, but you won't take 2 seconds to hit subscribe? You'll feel every emotion with her, but you won't leave a comment saying which part destroyed you most? If Cordelia had your level of commitment, she'd still be running scared in Bath's dark streets. But she didn't run. She stayed. She fought. She chose what mattered. Do the same. Subscribe. Comment. Be part of this community that believes broken people can heal and impossible proposals can lead to fairy tale endings. Because if this story moved you, and I know it did, I can see the tears, then you owe it to yourself to see what comes next. Don't abandon this journey now. You've come too far. Hit that subscribe button like your happiness depends on it. Because honestly, it kind of does. Stories like this don't find you every day. Don't let this be the one that got away.